Well, Tuesday is the next big primary day for the US presidential hopefuls in a campaign that's been anything but unusual. Friday night, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump cancelled a rally after protesters and supporters clashed in Chicago. Trump denounced the violence and says it was started by Bernie Sanders' supporters. A little earlier, Trump spoke with CNN's Wolf Blitzer and criticised how the skirmishes are portrayed in the media.
Well, there's not much violence. You know, when we have 20,000 and 15,000 and, many more than that in some cases. We had 35,000 people in Alabama, and, there were no protests. And, there's not much, first of all, let's not even use the word violence. There's very little disruption, generally speaking. It's a function of the press. The press likes to say what they like to say. If one person gets up and starts shouting and the police walk that person out, they try and make it like it's a violent thing. It's not violent. It's a protester that stands up, or probably a disruptor, because I think they're sent there by, some people on the other side. But it's a disruptor. But there's no violence. I mean, nobody's been hurt.
Trump talking on the eve of what could be a pivotal day in the presidential race. Let's bring in Michael Smerconish, host of CNN Smerconish. Michael, great to have you with us. The next 48 hours is key to see if Trump can cement his position. If he does well tomorrow, is he unstoppable?
Well, you're right, Linda, in saying that tomorrow is a critical day, because tomorrow the states of Ohio and Florida cast their ballots in this nomination process. Remember, here in the states, it's a state-by-state balloting that determines who will be the nominee for each of the respective parties. And while Donald Trump has had tremendous success thus far, there remain questions as to whether he can get the requisite 1,237 votes that are necessary for him to be the nominee. And can he get to that level before the party convention in July? The wisdom here is that if Trump can't get to that number before the party convenes, he won't be the nominee, even if he's in the league, even if he's in the lead, I should say, because Trump doesn't enjoy support among so-called establishment types within the Republican Party. If he wins in Ohio tomorrow, he seems destined to reach the level. But if he doesn't, if he comes up short tomorrow running against native son John Kasich, who's the governor of Ohio, then Donald Trump will probably not get to 1,237, and I predict he'll be denied when the party convenes this summer in Cleveland.
Michael, looking at the violence we've seen at the Donald Trump rallies over the weekend on Friday, Donald Trump did send out an interesting tweet, which I just want to read to you. He said, Bernie Sanders is lying when he says his disruptors aren't told to go to my events. Be careful, Bernie, or my supporters will go to yours. Michael, what's the likelihood that is there that this violence we've seen over the weekend will subside, or do you think things could escalate?
I fear that they'll escalate, and what I'm keenly interested to see is what are the political ramifications in the short term. Linda, it would be easy from the outside looking in to say that there's been violence corresponding to these Trump events and that there might be some blowback against Donald Trump as a result. But among his core supporters, among those who are most loyal to Donald Trump, they clearly see this as the work of outside agitators, and they remain steadfast in their support of Trump. So in the short term, I don't think that it hurts him. But in the bigger picture, in the long term, if he should become the Republican nominee of the party, I suspect the images like you've been showing internationally will come back to haunt him.
There have been some comparisons, interestingly, to the violence witnessed in Chicago in 1968 when anti-Vietnam demonstrators clashed with police. Surely it won't spiral that far out of control.
Well, but here's the difference, I think, between 2016 and what went on in 1968. In this particular case, you have a leader, the presumptive leader thus far of the party, who is saying things that are incendiary. There was no one on stage in 1968 who was rallying the crowd to take this path. Donald Trump in the last week has said things like, I wish I could punch that protester in the mouth. So when he goes on with Wolf Blitzer and when he tries to distinguish himself from the violence and to say that it's the work of his party opponents or Bernie Sanders, he's overlooking some of the very words that he's offered, which I think have played a causal connection in all of this. He's greenlit. He's given a path, I think, to his supporters that this type of behavior is okay, and it's not okay.
Michael, viewers around the world write to me on social media saying this presidential campaign is the best reality TV show they've seen in a while. They treat it as a joke, and foreign leaders we know have expressed alarm. What should we make of this international fascination with Trump?
Well, sadly, I think that they're right. And sadly, I think that Donald Trump is the embodiment not only of reality television, but of some of the shortened attention spans that have gone along with this particular race. I can't imagine that Donald Trump 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, would have posed a serious candidacy running in either party. And yet here we are today. I think that he's been a beneficiary of the polarization that exists in the United States. You know, unlike exists overseas, we have a very polarized media. And I think that Donald Trump is the natural outgrowth of what you get from commentators on radio and in cable television news who've been fostering some of this discontent. When you look at the internal polling data among Republicans, Republican voters are very angry at their government. Democratic voters, not so much. Why the difference between the two? I think it's the outside media influences, and Donald Trump has been there to harness those feelings.
And not just the media. Many commentators have pointed out that it's the Republicans that have unknowingly created the monster. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's true that the problems that exist within the Republican nominating process don't exist among the Democrats. Hillary Clinton has a commanding lead over Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders had a recent victory in Michigan that was unforeseen. Unless Bernie Sanders can replicate that vote tomorrow in, say, a state like Illinois, then I say Hillary Clinton is on a secure path to be the Democratic nominee. But the volatility on the Republican side of the aisle is likely to go all the way till the end of July, when Donald Trump either does or does not emerge with the nomination. And Linda, keep this in mind. If Donald Trump goes into Cleveland, which is the site of the Republican National Convention in July, if he goes in the lead but emerges without the nomination, then who's to say what Trump will do? And the prospect exists, I think, of Donald Trump mounting a third-party candidacy, which frankly would be to the benefit of the Democrats.
Well, but what would it do to the Republicans, to the Republican Party, if they were not to select Trump? Should he have the majority of delegates come that convention?
See, this is the difficulty for the party. They need the Trump constituency, because without the Trump constituency, the Republican Party stands no chance of regaining the White House. They can win Senate races. They can win House of Representative elections. In fact, they've been very successful in doing both in the last several cycles. But there's a built-in advantage in a general election for the Democratic Party when the race is for the White House. And that's because of increased participation from people of color and also the young and also women who come out every 4 years but don't come out as often in the lesser important elections. And so the Republican Party needs to cultivate these Trump supporters and make sure that they handle Donald Trump in a way at the convention that doesn't alienate them, because if they do, only a Democrat will be elected to the White House.
And interestingly, Trump did say earlier today, as he has said many times before, that he wants to face Hillary Clinton in the general election. How would that matchup play out?
Well, you know, there have been so many national surveys taken. I think at last count, I saw 49 different national surveys that have been taken since last May. And Donald Trump has lost 42 of them to Hillary Clinton. He ties in very few. He wins in very few. But in the head-to-head matchups, usually he comes out on the short end of the stick.
All right, Michael Smerconish, host of Smerconish. Really great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Linda.